أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. ودخل معه السجن فتيان قال أحدهما إني أراني أعصر خمرا وقال الآخر إني أراني أحمل فوق رأسي خبزا تأكل الطير منه نبئنا بتأويله إنا نراك من المحسنين. Now we came to the point where Yusuf was placed in jail, although he was very innocent and although everyone knew that he was innocent. However, they decided to, for many considerations, to put him in jail. And with him entered two young men to prison. دخل معه السجن فتيان. Two young men entered prison with him. Now, not probably simultaneously with him. However, while he was in prison, these two young men also joined him. And these two young men, of course, were prominent people. One of them, this, of course, we do not have it in the Quran, but in Hadith, and also allusion from the Quran, we have the information that one of them was the chief butler of the king, as later on he would go to the king and continue his position. One of them was the chief butler of the king, and the other one was in charge of the bakery of the king. So probably they were arrested for some suspicion of conspiracy or something like that. So they were imprisoned, and they entered jail with Yusuf. They were idolaters. They were of the religion of the people of Egypt. And we know that in Egypt, people worshipped many, many different gods. They believed in very complicated theology in Egypt at the time. So these two persons entered the jail, and they continuously saw a dream in jail. Inni arani means I'll continuously see this dream. They came to Yusuf alayhi salam, and they said, I continuously see this dream. So one of them said, Inni arani a'asiru khamra. I see that I'm squeezing wine out of grapes. He was the chief butler, of course. I see in my dream that I squeeze wine out of grapes. And the other one said, إني أراني أحمل فوق رأسي خبزا تأكل الطير منه. I see that I'm carrying bread on my head and birds come and eat from it. نبئنا بتأويله. Inform us of the interpretation. إنا نراك من المحسنين. We see you of the muhsinin, of good doers. Couple of things we learn from this ayah, independent of the following ayah, which is of course a very important one. One is that the manner of Yusuf in prison and his interaction with all these prisoners, who some of them were of course criminals, some of them were people of prominence who were arrested for conspiracy or something like that. His manner was as such that all the prisoners saw him from muhsinin. Inna naraka min al-muhsinin. What was the manner of Yusuf in prison? Of course, usually a person who's very attached to God is seen by others, whether they believe in his God or they do not believe in his God, is seen by others as a respectable person. And because Yusuf was very much immersed in worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in prison, these people saw that he is a very, very dedicated person. Inna naraka min al-muhsinin. The second thing about his manner, because only dedication to God doesn't make him from muhsinin, the way he treated these non-Muslims, these kuffar, these non-believers, so to speak, as we usually, when we usually talk about kuffar, we talk in a way that they are somehow liable to receive any sort of contempt and insult and other things from us. While we see the position of Yusuf in jail is very different. The way he is behaving in prison, the way he interacts with all these criminals and idolaters and people around him in prison has actually aroused that sense of respect in everyone. This is a good lesson for Muslims who live as minority in other cultures, in other societies. Here, everyone trusted Yusuf, just like our Prophet, peace be on him. Although he was not an idolater, although he did not worship idols, but at the time of Jahiliyyah, all idolaters trusted him and respected him. They knew that he doesn't worship idols. They knew that he had a very peculiar religion in their eyes. However, everyone trusted him and respected him. And here about Yusuf, the same thing. These men, who were, of course, prominent people of the court, caught because of conspiracy, very close to the king, when they saw the manner of Yusuf, and certainly they knew why Yusuf was in prison. Everyone knew why Yusuf was in prison. And they knew why Yusuf was in prison. They didn't know that Yusuf was innocent. They thought that probably because of the betrayal of his master, Yusuf is here. But the way they saw the behavior, the manners of Yusuf in prison, made them to think that this man is a man of God. This man is someone who has great knowledge. إِنَّا نَرَاكَ مِنَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ قَالَ. Now, he said, you know about my knowledge. Now he wants to preach them before responding to their request. Their request was, give us the interpretation of dreams. But he didn't give them the interpretation of dreams right away. He didn't want to show off. But he wanted to tell them a little bit about where this knowledge comes from. How has he acquired it? And who has given it to him? And that being who has given this knowledge to him is worthy of worship, not their lords, not their gods. So, قال لا يأتيكما طعام ترزقانه إلا نبأتكما بتأويله قبل أن يأتيكما. He said, no food will come to you unless I will tell you about the origin of that food. I have a knowledge that God has given me. I will tell you where that food has come from, how has it originated, what is it made of, whether it's from haram or halal, whether it's from a good harvest or a bad harvest. I have this knowledge as well. It's not only interpretation of dreams. I have other knowledge, other types of knowledge. And probably, of course, they wanted to see this knowledge of him, and he showed them the knowledge for them to believe in whatever he's going to say afterwards. قال لا يأتيكما طعام ترزقانه إلا نبأتكما بتأويله. تأويله means the origin, the reality of that food. I will inform you قبل أن يأتيكما, before it comes to you. It's just like that knowledge of Isa alayhi salam, where he says in the Quran, وَأُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا تَأْكُلُونَ وَمَا تَدَّخِرُونَ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ. God has given me great knowledge. With that knowledge, I can give life to the dead. With that knowledge, I can cure the ill and the blind. And I can inform you of what you eat in your houses and what you store. Without coming to your houses, I can do that. The same type of knowledge here. Yusuf says, I have the same type of knowledge. لا يأتيكما طعام ترزقانه إلا نبأتكما بتأويله قبل أن يأتيكما. Now, this is not because of me. ذلكما مما علمني ربي. This is what my Lord has taught me. Actually, he's arousing in them, both of them, the one who is going to be released and the one who is going to be executed. He wants them to prosper in Tawheed, in belief in God. So he says, my Lord has taught me. Look what a type of Lord, what kind Rabb do I have. teaching me all these. ذَلِكُمَا مِمَّا عَلَّمَنِي رَبِّي. Why Allah has taught me this and not others? إِنِّي تَرَكْتُ مِلَّةَ قَوْمٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ كَافِرُونَ. I have abandoned the religion of those who do not believe in Allah. Now, Allah is the Arabic term for God. And of course, he was not speaking Arabic, he was talking in Coptic language, and the name for God, God the Creator, because they had several gods, but one name for God the Creator. I have left the religion of those who do not believe in God the Creator, Allah. Sometimes Muslims, even in translation of the Quran and in their writings, they are very insistent to use the word Allah instead of God. I don't know why. Because every nation has a word for God. Allah is not the name of God. Allah is the name of God in Arabic. And wherever Allah has used this term in the Quran, from other cultures have translated into Arabic. Because Arabs don't understand Yahweh or other God or other names, Khuda, for example, in Farsi or whatever. They don't understand. Translate it into Arabic and uses Allah. And when we are talking to other people, when we insist about the word Allah, they think that we believe in a different God. We have to be very careful about it. People shouldn't think that we believe in another God, different from their gods. And the God we worship is Allah, the God they worship is God, for example. Sometimes our insistence is not fruitful. Just like, for example, sometimes we insist very much we are Shia. By that, it means that we are not Muslims, isn't it? But the true Islam is Shia Islam. The true Islam is Shia Islam. By insisting that, no, we are not Muslims, we are Shia, we somehow insinuate, we give the idea to others that this is a deviant faith in Islam. We have, when we want to emphasize our faith, we have to be very careful how we emphasize it, the way we speak it to others. And also about the word Allah here, this is just a sort of digression from our main topic. I have left the religion of those who do not believe in God. Allah is the Arabic. Of course, Yusuf didn't say Allah. Maybe Yusuf never had used the word Allah, but Allah has translated the word into Arabic. I believe in إني تركت ملة قوم لا يؤمنون بالله وهم بالآخرة هم كافرون. Not believing in Akhirah, usually the idolaters did not believe in Akhirah. Whether in Egypt, of course, mostly those who worshipped different gods, they believed in a sort of idea of Akhirah. But at the time of the Prophet, majority of the idolaters did not believe in Akhirah at all. And this is what the Quran mentions several times. وَقَالُوا مَا هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا نَمُوتُ وَنَحْيَا وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهْرِ. They say that it's only the life of this world, and we come and go. It's just the time which brings us and takes us away. مَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ. The best answer to this issue, to this question, is that they don't have knowledge about it. It's just their conjectures. إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. They just think in this way. However, what is the reality of this life? What's going to come afterwards? No one can say for sure that there is nothing after this. No one can say for sure. Yes, some people can say for sure that there is something to come because they are ala bayyinatin min rabbihim. They have a proof from their Lord. They have seen it. They have shown it. So they can say with categorically that there is a life coming after this life. However, no one can categorically say that no, there isn't anything because they have no knowledge. It's just conjecture. It's just thinking in this way, that saying that it's not plausible, it's not reasonable, for example. Reasonable in the sense that we cannot understand it. This is the extent of the argument which could be provided for rejecting Akhirah. Otherwise, there is no proof. إنهم يرونه بعيدا. They think that it is not possible. They think it is not plausible. It's very far-fetched. However, when we look at it, وَنَرَاهُ قَرِيبًا, we see it quite there. It is the reality which is coming. So I have left that faith of those people who do not believe in God and in Akhirah. وَاتَّبَعْتُ مِلَّةَ آبَائِي, and I have followed the religion of my fathers, Ibrahim wa Ishaq wa Yaqub. Of course, these are the people about whom everyone can boast. Yusuf can boast that these are my fathers, Ibrahim and Ishaq and Yaqub. The way the Quran talks about Ibrahim and Ishaq and Yaqub is really amazing. وَاذْكُرْ عِبَادَنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ أُولِي الْأَيْدِي وَالْأَبْصَارِ. These were the people with insight and with reason, with intellect. إِنَّا أَخْلَصْنَاهُمْ بِخَالِصَةٍ. We had purified them with one thing, thinking about home, about, of course, hereafter, when we go to the next world, that is our home. This is our just place of temporary residence. This is a hotel. We come and go. We check in and check out. But home is somewhere else. إِنَّا أَخْلَصْنَاهُمْ بِخَالِصَةٍ ذِكْرَ الدَّارِ. They were only thinking about the home, the abode, the final abode. So it's very plausible for Yusuf to boast about his fathers. Now, Yusuf, as we mentioned, separated from his father when he was 7 or 9. However, what Yaqub had taught him about this religion and what God had taught him about this religion was not something that he was going to forget. And all through these years in the courts of the king, or the house of Aziz, he had never swerved in his faith. مَا كَانَ لَنَا أَن نُشْرِكَ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. We never associate any partner with God. Now, of course, do we associate partners with God? No and yes. No and yes. No in the sense that, yes, we only believe in one God and we try to worship only one God. But in our hearts, the way we behave is like those who believe in other things beside him, who trust other things beside him. But this is pure faith, completely separate from any type of shirk or association with God. ذَلِكَ مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ عَلَيْنَا. This is the grace of God upon us, وَعَلَى النَّاسِ, and upon people. It's not possible that everyone should be like us. It's not possible. Rarely people come to this world who have this caliber of faith and purity, and these people have the grace of Allah for themselves and for others, because others should follow them as well. It's the grace of God that we have the Prophet. Otherwise, we would have been just wandering around, not knowing how to worship, who to worship. It's the grace of God that this purity is given to certain people. وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ. The majority of the people do not give thanks. Now, let's come back to the previous verse. It says that ذَلِكُمَا مِمَّا عَلَّمَنِي رَبِّي. What I have learned, what I know, that type of knowledge. This is different from knowledge of Nubuwwah, by the way. Knowledge of Nubuwwah is revelation coming down. This knowledge which he says, I inform you about the food which comes to you. Or Isa alayhi salam says, I inform you what you eat and what you store in your homes. This is not knowledge of Nubuwwah. This is a sort of knowledge given to them as a gift and as a miracle, of course. And they do not wait for revelation to come and tell them, for example, what this person has in their house or where this food has come from. It's just like the way we understand things. The way, for example, we see things very clearly here. We see people sitting here. They see things in the, for example, what is stored in house of other people. It's just the knowledge extended a little bit. And this is the ata of the Lord. Now, why this knowledge is not given to everyone? Why only certain people have this type of knowledge? Because not everyone can control themselves when they have this knowledge. They can use it against others. just like magic, which of course magic has an evil source, that knowledge. This knowledge has a quite pure source from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The magicians somehow have certain type of knowledge which is very similar to this, but they get it from evil source. And they use it to harm others. And of course that's why it's forbidden. They never prosper. They are never forgiven for that. However, it shows that if you are not pure enough, this knowledge cannot be given to you. Otherwise, Allah is not miserly to withhold His knowledge. He says, وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. No one can encompass anything of His knowledge except what He wills. And what He wills has a measure. If you are pure, then Allah will give you whatever you cannot imagine. The only thing is that it's very difficult to get to this extent of purity. This extent of purity in which Allah does not withdraw anything from them and gives whatever is possible to be given to a servant. That needs a sort of relationship with God which is different from what usually most of the people have. Not that most of the people would go to hell, no. Just with that level of faith that most of the people have, they go to paradise. However, they do not deserve in this world, maybe in next world, but in this world they cannot have this type of knowledge. Now, there's one hadith from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. In the book Misbah al-Sharia, he talks about the principle of interactions of human beings in this world. He says, أصول المعاملات تقع على أربعة أوجه. The principle of the interactions have four aspects, of course. معاملة الله ومعاملة النفس ومعاملة الخلق ومعاملة الدنيا. The way we interact with God, the way we interact with our own self, the way we interact with people, and the way we interact with this dunya. These are four principal aspects of our interaction. Now, the hadith is very beautiful and very long. With regards to mu'amalatullah, he says that when you are dealing with God, when you interact with God, you have to keep certain principles. And أما أصول معاملة الله تعالى فسبعة أشياء. The principal aspects of interaction with God are seven. First, أداء حقه. You have to give what is due to Allah in terms of respect, in terms of knowing your position and His position. Usually we don't know, isn't it? Usually the way we pray, the way we talk to God, the way we imagine God means that we do not actually give what is due in terms of respect and right to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First, أداء حقه. Second, حفظ حده. Keeping His limits, your limits and His limits. You know that you are created and He is the creator. You know that whatever you have in terms of wisdom, knowledge, justice, whatever you think has come from Him. You see, sometimes we say, is God just, for example? If He is just, why does He punish, for example, children? Or why does He punish innocent people? Or something like that. We do not actually respect, when we think about God, we do not respect the fact that this sense of justice which has been placed in us, bringing about all these questions, is just a splash of the ocean of justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do not keep that limit. حفظ حده وشكر عطائه. And being thankful of His gifts and what He has given to us. والرضا بقضائه. To be content with whatever He decrees. This is of course what most of us do not have. We say it by our tongues, we do not believe it by our hearts. وَالصَّبْرُ عَلَى بَلَائِهِ. And to be patient on His test. وَتَعْظِيمُ حُرْمَتِهِ. And to glorify His respect. وَالشَّوْقُ إِلَيْهِ, and to have longing for him. Now, most of these, of course, cannot be found in ordinary people. If someone keeps these 7 things, these 7 principles of interaction with God, then of course God knows what he is going to give to the servant, to his creature. مَا كَانَ عَطَاءُ رَبِّكَ مَحْظُورًا. The gift of your Lord has no limit. He gives limitless. We limit that gift. We block it to come. And of course we block it because we do not respect these things which are mentioned here. Anyhow, our time is up. Some people actually think it's very far-fetched for Imam Hussein or other Aimma alayhimus salam to have these type of knowledge, these types of knowledge. These are types of knowledge mentioned very abundantly and frequently in the Quran, given to different people. Even those who are not prophets, for example, this type of knowledge were given to them. And we shouldn't think that people like Amir al-Mu'mineen or Hussein ibn Ali, with that status that they had as the awsiya of the Khatamun Nabiyeen, were deprived of these types of knowledge. Denying this type of knowledge for these people of high caliber means that we are so narrow-minded, so narrow in our thinking, that we think that anything which is beyond our knowledge, ability, and capacity that we ordinarily see around ourselves is impossible for people of higher calibers, of higher status, which is, of course, a wrong idea. It's a wrong idea. If it's proved by authentic material, by authentic sources, through authentic sources, that yes, certain people are given these types of knowledge. And even in our time, we see people, ordinary people, not of this caliber, of course, not the caliber of prophets or siddiqeen who are a'imma. We see people having certain types of these gifts given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for certain reasons, even if they are not as pure as we mentioned in this hadith. So why should we deny that these people had these highly high stations of knowledge and the position which gives them this type of quality? It's just narrow-mindedness to think in that way. It's becoming very materialistic, very experiential, if we think that the Aimma and prophets are like us. And on the other hand, it is quite unreasonable to exaggerate the position of these people, because usually people tend to either exaggerate and take their position close to the position of God, na'udhu billah, or on the other hand, to fall short of the knowledge, the position, the wisdom which are given to these people. And of course, when we relate the story of Karbala, we have to be very careful not to compare the feelings, the attitudes, and the attributes of Imam Hussein alayhi salam with our own. He's a very different person, although human being, but with a different type of knowledge, seeing with the light of Imamah and with the light of Siddiqiyya what other peoples do not see. However, they have human affections as well. They were human beings. We see in the story of Karbala these affections coming up again and again in the story of his son Ali Asghar, and especially in the story of his son Ali Akbar and his nephew Qasim. We see these human affections showing itself greatly, telling us that although they had this high caliber of faith and love for Allah, they were human beings and they had the same type of love, affection, attachments that we have. Now, in the story of Qasim and Ali Akbar, the comparison is very interesting, because when Qasim wanted to ask permission to go for the battle, Imam alayhi salam was very reluctant to give him permission. First of all, because he was very young, And secondly, because he was a trust given, something trusted to him by his brother, Hassan alayhi salam. And he was just like his son, but a son that he had brought up in his own house of his brother, Hassan ibn Ali. He was very reluctant, and that's why Qasim insisted a lot, kissed his hand, besieged him that please let me go and fight. Now, in the case of Ali Akbar, because he was his own son, Imam alayhi salam felt that he shouldn't show that affection, and he just the Maqtal says that as soon as Ali Akbar came, the first member of Ahlul Bayt who came and asked permission to go was the dearest, of course, to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And this is another lesson we learn of sacrifice, that the dearest of all was the first one Imam alayhi salam gave permission to go to fight single-handedly with that army. And as soon as he asked for permission, the Imam alayhi salam issued the permission. فَاسْتَأْذَنَهُ فَأَذَنَ لَهُ. He asked permission and he gave him the permission. But after Ali Akbar turned towards the enemy and his back was towards the Imam, tears came to the eyes of the Imam, and Imam said, "Oh Allah, you are a witness that we are sending to this people a person who is closest to the Prophet in terms of his manners and his construction and his talking even. أشبه الناس برسول الله خلقا وخلقا ومنطقا." And the similarity was so that Imam alayhi salam says, and whenever we were eager to see, to remember the face of the Prophet, we looked at Ali Akbar's face. And with that sort of attitude, Imam alayhi salam sent Ali Akbar. He fought, of course, like a brave man. His age, it's mentioned between 18 to 24 or 25. Different accounts have it differently, but a young man. He fought very bravely, and in the heat of the battle, because there was no water, of course, in Karbala for 3 days now. In the heat of the battle, he felt that if he had one sip of water, he could fight better. So he came back to his father. قال يا أبت العطش قد قتلني وثقل الحديد قد أجحدني فهل إلى شربة من الماء سبيل. Father, the heaviness of the armor is killing me, and the thirst is very difficult to bear. Is there any way that I can drink some water? And here the Maghatal say Imam Hussein alayhi salam started crying and said that قاتل قليلا, fight for a little while, soon your grandfather Rasulullah will satisfy you with the water of paradise. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. صلى الله على محمد.
We have some time for question and answers. If there are any questions from either side.
عليكم السلام ورحمة
الله. I have a few questions, but one of them is just very quick. What was the seventh respect that we owe Allah?
الشوق إليه, to have longing for him, something which usually we lack. The sort of relationship that we usually have among ourselves in our family, that shawq and eagerness, we should have towards our Creator as well.
Okay. Allah, our understanding of Allah is everything is done for a reason, and everything in the Quran is included for a reason. So what was the reason of telling us that the second miracle of Nabi Yusuf was to inform people about the origins of food. Why was his miracle to inform people about the origins of food and not some other miracle?
Well, what Yusuf is intending here is to convince these two people. One of them, who one of them is just on the verge of moving to the next world, and the other one is, of course, is an influential person in the court, and Yusuf knows that he's going to go back to the court. So he is trying to convince them that his faith is the right faith. And he's telling them about this miracle because this is the easiest thing that he can actually tell them and convince them with, because they could then ask the prisoners or the guards, because they were prominent people and they would have been told about it. They could have asked the guards that, okay, where this food has come from, which harvest, which kitchen, for example. So this was something that they could be convinced about.
Thank you. But Allah didn't write in the Quran that Nabi Yusuf worked to convince the two people. Allah says he convinced them through this specific means, which means there has to be some symbolism within telling us this.
Okay, many things are left to us to think about, isn't it? Allah doesn't have to say everything, otherwise, well, He has created us with intellect, and He relies in many points and in many respects He relies on our intellect, and if we do not use it, then we are responsible, not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the Quran is a book that we have to ponder about, that we have to think and read it with reflection and deliberation.
Any questions from the sister side?
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Alaikum salam.
We've mentioned Nabiullah Ibrahim alayhi salam. What's so special about Ibrahim when we compare him to Prophet Nuh or Prophet Lut or Shu'aib? But he does have this very central position. So what was it in his character that we can try and emulate?
First of all, the Sharia started with Nuh, okay, not with Prophet before Nuh. There was religion, of course, but not Sharia according to the Quran. شَرَعَ لَكُم مِّنَ الدِّينِ مَا وَصَّى بِهِ نُوحًا وَالَّذِي وَصَّيْنَا بِهِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَمُوسَى وَعِيسَى. So the Sharia started with Nuh alayhi salam, and the prophets who we call Ulul Azm were the prophets who had the Sharia, and of course the first Ulul Azm prophet was Nuh. However, Ibrahim founded the religion of Islam and named it Islam in a way that no one before him had done. The level of his submission, because even among the prophets the level of submission is different. Of course, we cannot judge, that's not our area at all. However, for Ibrahim, إِذْ قَالَ لَهُ رَبُّهُ أَسْلِمْ قَالَ أَسْلَمْتُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. This Islam that he actually believed with his flesh and blood, and he named this religion Islam. هُوَ سَمَّاكُمُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. He was the first person who gave a name to religion of God. I think we have mentioned this before several times, that God has only one religion, and all prophets have preached that one religion. After the prophets, the people have given these religions names. I mean, in Christianity, it's very clear that it was only after, several years after Isa alayhi salam, his followers called the faith Christianity. There was no name for it. There was a name, but they did not use that name actually, and the name was Islam. And the first person who gave this name was Ibrahim. هُوَ سَمَّاكُمُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. And also, after Nuh, especially in that area where Ibrahim lived, all traces of this faith, monotheism, had been obliterated. And he was the only one. And that's why the Quran says, Inna Ibrahim kana ummatan. He was one ummah himself. He was one religion, one faith himself. So these are the prominent things about Ibrahim. And also the Quran doesn't tell our Prophet to follow any other Prophet except Ibrahim. You have to follow what the guidance of Ibrahim. It means he's the closest to you.
Any question from the sister side?
Sheikh, in one of the lectures, you compared the crying of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam and the crying of Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam. With respect to Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, I can understand that, well, it's a human nature that when you remember some difficulties, one cries. But I think in his crying there was a message. He was trying to pass the message of Karbala. That's what I think. But in the crying of the Prophet Yaqub, although he knew that the Prophet Yusuf is alive, what could have been the message in his crying and remembrance?
So you mean that Imam Zainul Abidin was crying artificially to pass a message?
No.
So not artificial.
No, it wasn't.
It was real.
It was real.
But
I
it
think
passed on a message as well.
In the reality, there was a message of Karbala that he was trying to pass on. So what could have been the message involved in the crying of...
the message in Imam Zainul Abidin's crying, of course, was subsidiary. I mean, he was really crying for what had happened. I mean, then, of course, that passed on a message to others as well. That's why I said artificially it's not possible for him to cry this much. There shouldn't be any message in Yusuf, in Yaqub's crying. It was just the separation from Yusuf. He knew that he was alive, but he was so much attached to him that he couldn't bear that separation, and he was crying for that. And he was crying to his Lord. It's good, actually, even if we have material needs, even if we have very trivial needs, it's very good to cry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. We think that for material things or for trivial things, we shouldn't cry. Of course, we shouldn't cry complaining to God. But when we turn to God and when we think that the connection is established, that cry comes for itself. And if we are always asking for reunion with Yusuf alayhi salam, with God, and the connection comes, he certainly cries. And that's natural for any spiritual person. And not everything that prophets do should pass on a message. I mean, they were human beings, they had their own private lives as well. We have to somehow respect that aspect as well.
Any question from the sisters? Final question.
Sheikh, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam.
On the foreknowledge of the Imam alayhi salam, can you shed some light on the argument of Salehi Najafabadi in Imam Javed, Shahid Javed, sorry.
What's my view?
Yeah, no, just shed some light on that argument.
Oh, shedding some light on that. Actually, his argument is that the whole story from where Imam Hussein starts, mainly his argument is that Imam Hussein actually moved to seize the power. And not, of course, for personal interest, but for Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. Of course, the drive, the motivation was quite good, was a godly motivation to seize the power. And for this reason, it's not plausible that we think that he moves to seize the power while he knows that he's going to become a martyr. We have to probably put the whole argument of the book in its context. And the context was just before the Islamic Revolution, where Imam Khomeini and others were actually struggling against Shah, and they wanted to have power for good purpose. And there were certain people in religious circles who were saying that it's not allowed for religious people to seek power. And when the example of Imam Hussein was given, they said, no, he knew that he was going to be martyred, and he was not after power, and the ulama, especially the clergy, should not get involved in politics. I think the book was written as a whole in this context. He was trying to say that, look, this is the example of Imam Hussein. He wanted to fight for power, and it's allowed for the clergy to fight for power as well. The arguments of the book and the reports that he mentions, some of them are quite reasonable if we just exclude or isolate them from other arguments or other facts and details that we know about the story. In whole, having read the book a couple of times, I was not convinced of his arguments, actually, in light of many traditions that we have and many ayat of the Quran that we have about things, incidents much, much less important than this, were somehow known to prophets, to saints. They knew about such things. And I think an incident like this, when one of the greatest awliya Allah is going to be killed in this way, is not something to be somehow ignored in the whole knowledge of Anbiya and Awliya. Even the past Anbiya and Awliya, they should have known about this incident. And that's why in many traditions we have that, for example, such and such prophet knew about it, Zakaria knew about it, Adam knew about it, because it was an incident which somehow crushed the whole understanding of sanctity and spirituality with regards to these people. So, as I said, I was not convinced by the book. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We'll end there. Salawat.